There comes a moment in an empath's life when they stop asking, "Why do they keep hurting me?" and begin to ask, "Why do I keep attracting the same kind of person?" Even after reading countless books, trying to heal, and loving with pure sincerity, the loop returns: magnetic yet hollow relationships, people unready for real love, and the same ending every time: exhaustion, disappointment, and lost faith. Carl Jung warned long ago, as long as the mother wound remains unhealed, the empath will continue to call in the wrong souls, not because they want to, but because the unconscious is repeating a memory. Because buried beneath every broken heart is an older pain, one not born from romantic love, but from childhood. It is the moment you learned that love must be earned, that to be accepted, you had to obey, endure, suppress your real emotions. From that moment on, you no longer received love, you began to perform it. Your nervous system remembered the rhythm of conditional love, and from then, your heart no longer searched for peace, it searched for permission to exist. That is why you keep meeting souls who mirror the same primordial emptiness, the distant mother, the cold father, the relationships that forced you to prove your worth. This is not fate punishing you. This is your unconscious trying to wake you up, to bring the wound to the surface so you can finally see it and heal it. Today, we will go deeper, beyond attachment theory, beyond the cyclone of trauma, into the deepest layer of Carl Jung's psychology, the mother archetype. Because as long as this wound remains unseen, every lesson about love will repeat itself. But once you heal it, something miraculous happens. You stop searching for love because you become the love itself. Part 1. The archetypal root, separation from the Great Mother. In the ancient beginnings, long before humans ever had a name for wounding, the soul existed in a state of absolute unity, where everything was connected through the energy of the Great Mother. In mythology, she is the primordial ocean, the earth itself, the fertile darkness in which all life is conceived. In that place there was no fear, no separation, only the feeling of being held, supported, and allowed to be fully oneself. But then human consciousness began to awaken. Just as a child must leave the womb to take its first breath, humanity had to step out of the mother's embrace to recognize itself as a separate being. In that moment of separation, the first crack appeared, the mother wound. Psychologically, we can see this on a smaller scale. When a child begins to realize that the mother is not a part of them, that love can be withdrawn, that safety can disappear, that moment plants the seed of abandonment, a primal fear carried by every human soul. The child who once cried freely, expressed freely, and felt openly, begins to adjust to keep love. It studies the mother's moods, listens to every breath, every look, learns to stay silent when she is tired, learns to smile when she is sad. This is the birth of the empath, a soul that survives by feeling too much. But empathy, in this early form, is not a gift, it is a survival mechanism. The empath develops the ability to scan energy, to stay safe in an emotionally unpredictable environment. They learn to become a mirror for the needs of others, and in doing so lose sight of their own true reflection. Carl Jung called this the split between the self and the shadow, when the human soul must leave the field of oneness to become conscious, but in doing so, inadvertently loses touch with its natural instinct for connection. From this moment, the pain of separation becomes the foundation of modern psychology. Empaths carry the collective memory of that primordial unity, and so they long to return to it through love. They seek in others the feeling of belonging, merging, being fully seen, but in searching for the mother's embrace, they unconsciously seek out replicas of their original wound. Thus, they attract souls who are unready people who echo the same rejection, distance, or emotional absence that imprinted them in childhood. These wrong souls do not come to destroy. They come to mirror what remains unhealed. The mother wound, then, is not a private tragedy. It is an initiation of the human soul. We must leave the mother, get lost in life, and only then can we truly return, not as a frightened child, but as a conscious being carrying both pain and wisdom. When Jung said, Consciousness is born through separation. He wasn't speaking in abstraction. He was describing the spiritual evolution of the soul. Every time you feel abandoned, misunderstood, or rejected, it is the mother wound speaking, calling you back to yourself. And only when you dare to face that separation do you finally understand. Every encounter in your life, sweet or bitter, is the Great Mother whispering, "You were never separated from love. You are merely learning to find it within." Part 2. The hidden mechanism. When the mother wound becomes a distorted love pattern, the mother wound does not simply live in memory, it operates as an unconscious program, quietly dictating how we love, how we tolerate pain, and how we evaluate our worth. For empaths, this program becomes an emotional map they do not love based on compatibility, but based on the familiarity of pain. In Carl Jung's psychology, this is what he called a complex, an emotional energy center formed from early experiences. When the mother, or the psychological mother figure, is unstable, aloof, or overly controlling, the child is not just hurt, they identify with the wound itself. The result, as adults, they do not seek love, they seek confirmation that their wound is still real. They are strangely attracted to cold, distant, or emotionally unavailable people, not because they enjoy suffering, but because the brain calls it home. The unconscious whispers, "If I can make this person love me, maybe at last, Mother will love me too." And so they enter a hypnotic loop. Love, effort, disappointment, forgiveness, repeat. A ritualistic dance of hope and heartbreak. Jung once said, "We do not fall in love, we fall into an unhealed instinct." And this is why empaths often mistake intense initial connection for destiny. When they meet someone whose energy vibrates with a mother wound, the look, the silence, the emotional temperature, their entire body recognizes it. The racing heartbeat is not love. It is memory activation. It is the adrenaline of the soul encountering a familiar blueprint. These relationships often begin with overwhelming fusion, feeling completely understood, seen, as if we knew each other in a past life. But soon after the ecstasy comes the collapse. The empath begins to feel drained, ignored, minimized, shaped to fit the needs of the other. At this stage, they fall into what Jung called the projection loop. They project onto the other person the image of the ideal mother, the one who will understand, nurture, and heal them. But at the same time, they also carry the fear of the devouring mother, the one who consumes all their energy. Thus their love oscillates between two poles: dependence and escape, the desire for closeness, and the fear of being dissolved. This is why empaths, despite loving deeply, often feel lonely inside their relationships. They are physically present, but their soul remains on alert, listening, adjusting, anticipating. They love through survival reflexes, not true presence. The mother wound convinces them that love must hurt to be real. If someone treats them gently, without chaos or emotional turbulence, they feel empty. Because peace does not match their inner map, it is unfamiliar. And so, they unconsciously push away the kind ones, while attracting those who vibrate with disorder. In Jungian depth psychology, this is the shadow side of the mother archetype, both the nurturer and the devourer. When this archetype remains unintegrated, the empath becomes trapped between two extremes, sacrificing themselves to be loved, or freezing their heart to stay safe. Both are expressions of the same fear, the fear of abandonment, and the fear of being consumed. Here lies the deepest paradox of their journey. Empaths are not afraid of love, they are afraid of losing themselves inside it. They are not afraid of solitude, they are afraid of being alone with the pain the mother never soothed. At this depth, the mother wound is no longer a personal issue. It becomes a collective symbol of humanity's pain, the ache of being separated from source, from nature, from the higher mind. Empaths simply feel this ache most intensely because they were born to transmute it, first for themselves, and then for the world. Part 3, the awakening. When the empath realizes they cannot save anyone, at a certain point the empath begins to recognize a terrifying yet liberating truth. No one truly wants to be saved by them. Not because people are bad, ungrateful, or malicious, but because being saved requires confronting one's own darkness, something most humans spend their entire lives avoiding. And so, the empath suddenly becomes a mirror that shines too brightly, exposing what others are not ready to see. They cannot understand why their love is met with distance, resentment, or even hatred. But the truth is simple. Light always provokes resistance in the dark, and in the moment they are betrayed, misunderstood, or abandoned by the very people they try to save, the empath enters the most crucial stage of their journey, awakening from the illusion of rescue. Carl Jung once said, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In their deepest essence, the empath is the one who carries the lamp, but that lamp is not lit by trying to illuminate others. It ignites only when they dare to look into their own darkness. As long as they are controlled by the mother wound, love becomes a project of redemption. If I love enough, they will change. If I'm patient enough, they will heal. If I endure enough, they will learn how to love. But the painful truth is, no one can heal from love borrowed from someone else. Awakening arrives when the empath realizes they are dying inside while trying to keep someone else alive. That is the moment their soul asks, not with logic, but with desperation, "If I keep giving like this, what part of me will be left?" This question marks the turning of energy from outward to inward. The empath begins to understand that saving others was never love. It was fear disguised as kindness. Fear of not being needed. Fear of being forgotten. Fear that without being useful, they would have no value. Jung called this the shadow of compassion, the belief that self-sacrifice is virtue, that unconditional forgiveness is holiness, that enduring suffering proves true love. But as consciousness matures, they realize love does not require anyone to disappear in order to exist. And the moment they stop trying to be the savior, something surprising happens. The world does not collapse. The person they clung to may walk away, go silent, or find a new source of supply. But for the first time, the empath does not chase. They begin to feel a strange sense of peace as everything falls into its rightful place. This is the stage of releasing the mother energy, returning to the world, the emotional burdens they carried for too long. No more playing the universal healer. No more trying to fix anyone's life. They simply relight the flame within themselves and discover that their light can illuminate the entire room without dragging anyone along. From this point forward, the empath begins to understand what conscious love is. They no longer love out of fear of loss. They no longer help out of fear of being useless. They no longer listen as a way to earn acceptance. They choose presence without dissolving. They feel others' pain without carrying it home. They can witness someone's collapse without feeling responsible for it, because they have learned a sacred lesson no school ever teaches. Not everyone who falls wants to rise, and it is not your mission to turn anyone into the light. In this moment, the empath becomes a true healer, not through action, but through presence. Their strength no longer lies in what they can do for others, but in their ability to maintain inner peace in the midst of chaos. And when they reach this point, the wrong souls naturally fall away, for they no longer resonate with the frequency of pain. It's not that the empath stops loving, but because now their love no longer needs to save anyone to feel meaningful. Part 4. Soul Alchemy. When pain transforms into sovereign light. After the empath releases the savior role, a vast quietness appears. No more dramatic relationships, no more emotional storms, only a strange emptiness. And for many, this is the most frightening stage. They expected peace to feel like happiness, but when it finally arrives, they feel nothing. This is nigredo in alchemy, the blackening of the soul. Everything that once defined me dissolves. Beliefs, roles, illusions, even the dreams once thought to be destiny. The empath looks around and realizes no one needs them anymore. But this is not loss. It is the shedding of emotional karma. Carl Jung said, One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Enlightenment does not come from forced positivity, but from sitting in one's own night without running. In that darkness, the empath finally sees everything they avoided. The anger they swallowed, the fear of being forgotten, the sadness they never cried. These disowned fragments return, not to punish, but to be loved as part of the whole. Then the second stage begins, albedo the purification. When the darkness has been named, water begins to flow. Water of tears, water of intuition, water of true compassion, not driven by fear, but by understanding. Here, the empath no longer reacts to others' emotions. They observe them. They recognize not every pain requires healing, and not every hurt belongs to them. They begin to curate energy, like a gardener removing weeds to protect young shoots. Their softness becomes wisdom, refined by fire and water. And when the inner battle between shadow and light quiets, rubedo, the union, begins. This is the true alchemy. Pain turns into creative energy. Loneliness becomes solitude. Loss becomes vision. The empath no longer needs meaning to live, because they become the meaning. They begin to create not only through art, but through their presence, their voice, their listening, their love. From every wound, they extract a grain of gold. From every crack, they let light pass through. In Jungian terms, this is conjunctio, the union of opposites, when the inner feminine emotion nurturing and the inner masculine awareness, action, finally merge. The empath stops seeking others to complete them, for they have become the inner mother and father they once lacked. They nurture themselves with compassion and protect themselves with awareness. This is the wholeness alchemists once symbolized as the philosopher's stone. But the miracle doesn't stop there. As they reach this state, their energy changes completely from absorbing to radiating. They are no longer affected by others' energies because they have become the source. Rooms grow warmer and calmer when they enter. Others feel safe simply standing near them. This is the silent power of sovereign presence. No more need to prove anything. No more fear of being forgotten. No more hunger to be chosen. The empath no longer needs love to feel worthy, for they have become love embodied. They understand that every relationship is simply a reflection of the relationship between the soul and the universe. And when they live in that frequency, the wrong souls cannot reach them, for low vibrations cannot cling to pure light. Soul alchemy does not create a perfect human. It creates a conscious soul, one who knows darkness still exists but no longer governs them, one who knows love still comes and goes but peace remains, one who knows that saving others is not as powerful as standing beside them with an awakened heart. By this stage, the empath no longer asks, "Why do I attract them?" They simply smile and say, "They were lessons, and now I have become my own teacher." Part 5. The Field of Healing. When the empath's love becomes a collective resurrection, after completing the inner alchemical process, the empath is no longer who they once were. They no longer seek love, they radiate it. And something extraordinary begins to happen. The world around them starts to reorganize itself. Old relationships dissolve naturally. Those who once hurt them quietly withdraw. And new souls, those who know how to love with awareness, begin to appear. It is not because the empath has become more attractive, but because their energetic field has changed its very nature. Before, their energy carried the frequency of reaction, absorbing, enduring, over-empathizing. Now, that energy becomes active, coherent, and directed. Carl Jung called this the field effect of individuation, the ripple effect created by a person who is united with their true self. When one individual becomes conscious, the entire system around them must shift to regain equilibrium. Thus, personal healing is never just personal. Every time the empath chooses not to react, an old energetic pattern in the collective dissolves. Every time they choose boundaries, instead of torment. A thread of emotional karma untangles. Every time they love without rescuing, love without fear, the world upgrades a little. Those who once fed on their energy feel this shift first. Some withdraw, sensing there is no longer emotional supply to latch onto. Others begin to awaken, confronted by their own shadow through the empath stillness. And here, the empath realizes the deepest truth. Healing does not require intervention, only presence. They become a resonant field, a space in which others feel safe enough to confront themselves. No longer the one telling others how to change, but the one who inspires change simply because being near them makes people feel more authentic. This is the energy of the integrated empath. Stillness becomes their language. Peace becomes their transmission. In alchemical terms, this is multiplicatio, the multiplication of true gold. Awakening is no longer an idea, but becomes a creative force moving through everyday life. The empath creates order in chaos, not by force, but through frequency. They turn conversations into portals of awareness, silence into a healing medium, and their presence into living proof that love can take human form. On the soul level, this awakens something within the collective, especially the suppressed feminine energy of humanity. For centuries, the world has operated through the principles of control, competition, and domination, distorted expressions of the Dark Father. The empath is the embodiment of the reborn mother, bringing softness, empathy, and emotional wisdom, not as weakness, but as the power of containment. They do not fight the world. They recalibrate it with a different frequency, not through resistance, but through presence in everyday moments. When they listen to someone in pain without absorbing it, when they remain peaceful in the midst of storms, when they forgive without abandoning boundaries, when they love without trying to possess. This is the ritual of collective resurrection, where every healed empath becomes a luminous cell in the body of humanity. And when millions of such cells vibrate at the same frequency, the consciousness of the world begins to change. Jung once wrote, "The world hangs by a thin thread, and that thread is the psyche of man. The world is upheld not by technology or power, but by the level of awakening in the human soul." Through their individual journey, the empath strengthens that thread, not with words, but with the energy of their lived truth. At this stage, they no longer live inside the story of healing. They enter the story of creation, where every action, every choice, every relationship is an expression of conscious love. And they realize that healing the world is not a mission, but the natural consequence of living in alignment with their soul's frequency. Finally, the empath understands a truth. Jung symbolized through the self, the golden center of the soul. When you become whole, the world around you reorganizes itself. When you are at peace, the darkness of others loses its power. When you live in the light, you do not need to preach, only to exist. And in that moment, the empath completes the cycle of the mother wound. No longer the child seeking love, no longer the healer carrying burdens, but the mature soul who embodies both mother and father, light and shadow, becoming a bridge between the finite human and the infinite divine.